Welcome into sportsbookreview.com. I'm Gary.
And I'm Chris.
And this is the college football off-season week 4 show. It doesn't feel like it's been a month. I'll tell you that. But I will tell you what we're getting into. We got FCS football this weekend. We are diving right back into some live action, and I am pumped about it. Hopefully you are as well. Before we get started, lots to discuss today, of course. But before we do, sbrpicks.com/NCAAF. Go ahead and check out the website. It's your one-stop shop for all of your college football gambling needs and information. And, of course, you can find our videos over there as well. Since you are already watching the show, do us a favor. Go ahead and hit that like button. It's a little thumbs up button. It looks kind of like that. You can see it right there. Hit the like button. Make sure that you are subscribed to the channel and jump in the comments. We want to know what you like about the show, what you don't like. Tell us what we should talk about. Any recommendations? Anything else? We've got a long ways to go in this quote-unquote offseason, even though there really isn't one in college football anymore. But we want to hear from you. So jump in the comments. Tell us everything that we need to know from you guys. As well as that, share the show out. Tell your friends. We would certainly like to grow this thing even more. You know, during the season, it's one thing. In the offseason, when there's typically not games being played, even though we've got an FCS season coming up from February all the way through April into May. The numbers are bigger during the FBS season. We want you guys tuned in year-round because football is ever-changing, ever-evolving, continuing on. So make sure you do that. We would certainly appreciate it. We're going to start off today's show with a major topic that popped out last week. And it was, I believe, just the day after we recorded our show last week, EA Sports announced that they are bringing back their college football game. Now, there's a lot to dig into. I have my notes. I am ready to roll. They are rebooting their college football series for next-generation consoles. That would be PS5, Xbox 360, et cetera, et cetera. They have not had a game since 2013.
Yep.
And it will likely be another 2 years or so before this thing comes out. And they are just now building the team to start development, to start everything else. They have their CLC license agreements with like 100-plus schools. Now, there's 130 FBS schools. They want it to be all of them. Now, not every big school is a part of the CLC. That's collegiate licensing, whatever. Georgia is not in that group, et cetera. But I can guarantee you, Georgia will be in this game, along with everybody else. Let's go through some of these topics. ESPN had an article that kind of hit the high points of this. Why is EA bringing the video game back now? Well, it was a very popular title to begin with. But, of course, the Ed O'Bannon case basically ended it for them. It ended the college basketball game. It ended the college football game. They could not use the name, image, likeness of these players. And rather than risking it, they said, all right, well, because if you randomly generate player number 23 for Arkansas State, and it just so happens to look like the same guy that wears number 23 and they play the same position and whatever, then you put yourself at liability for that. Because at that point, you're using his likeness. He can sue you for it, et cetera, et cetera. So, the way that they are doing this, they just started the strategy and development team for it. It's so long as the name, image, likeness stuff stays the way that it is right now, then they are just going to randomly generate. And they'll take the risk and we'll see what happens, right? And it's not going to be NCAA football. They're changing the name of it. It's going to be EA Sports College Football. There's just a lot that's going to go into it. And the fan demand for this game is overwhelming.
Yes.
Just incredible. And people have been talking about it forever. You know, when are they bringing the video game back? Every time they talk about anything that has to do with paying players or anything like that, it always turns into, when are they bringing the video game back? And I am 38 years old. And I played this up until I was 30. And I still play it today. I still do simulations with updated rosters and all this kind of stuff all the time. I mean, I have kept the same PS3 console hooked up to my main TV at the house so that I could play that game. It still holds up. It's still a good game. It's a little more arcade-ish than Madden. But there's a lot that's going to go into this. When can you play it? It's not going to be this year. I'll tell you that. And more than likely, it'll be about 2 years from now. The reason that they decided to bring it back now is because of all the NIL talk and because of the ever-evolving college football landscape. This is an interesting part of this. They asked, what's going to be in the game, a deep, immersive experience that has true, wide-open gameplay for college football, whatever. He said EA Sports is starting with the gameplay, making sure that's strong, and then going from there. Holt is the president of EA Sports. He is the one that actually talked about this. He said, whether that's a reimagining or an evolution of things that were in the game before or new things and new ways to play, I don't want to get into the details of what we're already planning and what we'll put in that, but it will be something that our core fans that appreciated and loved NCAA 14, they will love this game because that's just the starting point. The question, of course, does the NCAA need to change its rules before the game can return? No. Current NCAA rules prohibit EA Sports from paying players to use their names, images, and likenesses in the game. If those rules are still in effect when the game is released, EA Sports plans to include real details such as team names, mascots, and uniforms, but not anything that would resemble the real players on the roster. So that is a big, big change, and we're going to talk about the NIL stuff here in just a minute. But I think that there was a reason why they announced it when they did.
Yeah, they knew the NIL stuff was coming. Yes.
As far as why the game will be called college sports or college football instead of NCAA football, so I'll just say it straight from him. Holt said, it all really starts with where we see college football going. There's a lot of things happening, and there's a lot of things happening in sports. EA Sports College Football gives us a name and a brand to kind of work around some things that might evolve, as well as what we're focusing on really out of the gate, which is really the FBS Division I schools and the road to the college football playoff and the college football championship. There have been numerous reports about the idea of a split between the FBS and the NCAA. If they don't name it NCAA, they don't have to worry about it going forward. This is going to be a long-term branding thing. They're going to put out a new game every year, just like they do with Madden, just like they used to do with NCAA football, etc.
That's right.
I think that is a possibility of happening. I think the FBS and the NCAA could split as far as football goes. Now, basketball, nothing's going to change, all that. But I think, we've talked about that split between FBS and NCAA. There's also the possibility of a split between G5s and the Power 5s. There's a big-time possibility that this sport could look completely different going forward, even in the next 5 years, 10 years. I think it's a smart move. Just call it college football. That way you don't have to worry with NCAA. You don't have to worry with, you can take out teams as you go. It doesn't even matter. I think it's very, very simple and smart of them to do this. This is going to be a lot of fun. I have been so stoked about this ever since we heard about it last week. And I know that you are. What'd you tell me last week? You're going to be the wet blanket on this?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to crap on it, but I'm not a gamer. I just don't play games.
But I
never did.
You also understand the
never had
importance.
A console.
The importance of this game coming back.
I sat in the dorm room and I watched other people play it.
The popularity of the sport is dwindling, with Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State really being, and LSU and Georgia and whoever else from time to time, being the only people that can win a national championship. Now that we've gotten into the playoffs, you have to win 2 games against really good teams. There's not a lot of teams out there that can do that. You can upset a team here and there. It used to be easier when it was the BCS. It was even easier back in the 90s when it was just bowl tie-ins and people just had to like your team or your coach. Georgia Tech won a national championship in 1990. Yep. Colorado won a national championship. BYU won one in 1984 because everybody loved Lavelle Edwards. So I think that this will help bring back the popularity to the sport on a national level, from the West Coast all the way over, from the small schools on up. And they're going to have to get every school involved in this, whether they've got a CLC or not, because of the recruiting. Those kids are going to be massive, massive fans of this game. They always were. Now,
that's not the game's responsibility. They're trying to get all the schools, but But if one of these small schools isn't interested and they're playing hardball and they don't see any value in selling them their rights, that's their decision.
Agreed.
You don't hold the game up for that.
No. You're not going to hold the game up. But I'm telling you, I don't know that a single school out there will not be a part of this because they understand the value.
Well, yeah,
of,
I get
of getting
that.
their brand in front of all
But
these
this should be
faces.
done in a week.
It really should.
You send a memo out to everybody. This is our contract. This is what we were looking for. This is what we're doing. Yada, yada. And they either sign or they don't. We're going forward, man.
Oh, yes. Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you.
The steamroller of progress is going to continue to move on.
Yes.
We're not looking back.
I really think part of the NFL's success and their popularity, their TV numbers, all that, is the Madden video game.
100%.
And so, along with fantasy football and everything, there's so many interactive ways for you to be involved with the game, not just gambling, but also the video game, the fantasy sports, all of that, all these different ways that you can be immersed in a sport. College football did not have a lot of those. They did away with the fantasy stuff.
I was just about to say, they did a couple of years of like a college fantasy game.
And the ratings, the TV ratings were astronomical.
The problem with the college fantasy game is there's too many damn colleges. This is too big.
Well, there's too many colleges, and it's not. So at one point in the NFL, like if you were a starter, you were playing a bunch. And now it's like the Patriots.
That's right.
There's like 6 different running backs you can play for them.
You know, don't take a Patriot running back. Bill Belichick hates you.
Exactly.
Like that's rule number 4 of fantasy football.
And it's the same thing with Alabama, same thing with LSU, et cetera. You don't know who's going to pop each week. John Emery could have a really good week one week.
Also, the competitive balance of half of the games, half of the big boy teams are getting pay for wins, or they're playing a conference opponent that's just far lesser than them.
Agreed.
And so you just pick a team and pick a guy from a team playing a high school team or a correctional facility, and you know.
And then what you got to hope for is that correctional facility makes the game just a little bit more difficult than it really should be, so that they keep all the starters in. Right?
So therein lies the issue with
college
some
fantasy
of the problems with college. I think college can fix a lot of its problems. I'm glad the game's coming back. I do see the value and the importance of it. I liked it I enjoyed being in the dorm room when guys were playing and hanging out. You know, you can only watch the 3-peat of Sports Center so many times. Like, it just is what it is. I think college football can do other things to make itself more relevant in the world of fans.
Yes. Oh, I agree with that.
Some of this is they have to. Somebody needs to be in a room right now having a conversation about how can we address competitive balance.
Oh,
because the NFL, all the professional sports have competitive balance rules and guidelines and things that they have structured. Some are far better than others. Baseball and basketball, you can kind of do whatever you want. Hard salary cap, strong draft, clear cut. You're the worst team, you get the best pick. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's just a situation where it's what makes that sport better.
I think that the video game is a starting point to help with that, right? Because once you boost up the popularity of the sport itself across the country, and it's going to take a little time. I'm not saying that that's the end all be all, but you know, the Pac-12 fans out there don't really seem to care very much about this. However, they did care a lot
about the game,
and they did care about their schools and whatnot when the game was going on.
And that's when USC and Oregon had a big boom.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a big deal here that can happen because of that. Same thing with the Big 12, same thing with the ACC, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there's only a handful of teams, like we said, that can win a national championship every year. This all kind of flows right now. So let's move into the next topic. Next topic is National Signing Day was last week, and it is not nearly as entertaining or high intensity, I guess, as it used to be. The biggest signing day is in December. Like it's in the middle of bowl season. It's, you know, that is when 80% of the blue chippers sign. And the big names and whatnot, there's a few stragglers that hang around until February. But for the most part, guys don't want to lose their spot in a signing class. They don't want to get their scholarship pulled. So they go ahead and sign in December. And this go around, like we'll go ahead and talk about, the schools to pay attention to, et cetera. Alabama had the highest rated class ever in the history of 247 sports, in the history of rivals, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of perpetuates the problem, like you were talking about. Ohio State at number 2. They would have been number 1 in pretty much any other year, sans like 4 seasons. They would have had a number 1 class with what they had. But we won't talk about them. We're not going to talk about the top 10. Oregon had a great class. Oregon has put themselves, as far as blue chip ratio, into that national title equation. Texas A&M has done the same thing. LSU, of course, continuing recruiting strong, even with a not great year on the field. You lose as many starters and whatnot as they did, as much returning production as they did, it's going to be an issue. So the same old guys that have been there are continuing on. Notre Dame, Michigan, Oklahoma, et cetera, right? Continuing on with that. USC did really, really well this year, where last year, not great at all. So everybody talks about Clay Helton losing his job. He seems to be doing all right out there.
I'd say, yeah, every time you turn around, he's doing fine.
I wanted to bring up a few different schools. Jackson State, FCS school, HBCU, highest rated FCS school in recruiting rankings ever. Deion Sanders, of course, the coach there, number 85 in the country. I mean, they were killing it. They were right behind Coastal Carolina, which is saying something, especially after a year like this. But Deion, man, he brought in some 4 stars, brought in some 3 stars, and that doesn't even include the transfers that they brought in, which completely remade their roster. There has never been an FCS team as talented as the one that you're going to get from Jackson State. Now, is Deion Sanders going to be able to coach them? Who knows, right? He has not been a coach at any level before. What did he coach, like a Pro Bowl or something?
That doesn't count.
But did he coach at Prime Academy before they shut that thing down? Like as a high school coach?
Yeah, probably. He doesn't have any college experience.
Yeah, he's got no college, and not as an assistant or anything like that, but he says that this is what he wants to do. And obviously the man can recruit. His name alone has brought in some high-end talent. I cannot wait to see what's going on with that. As far as G5 schools that we need to pay attention to, that had pretty high-rated classes, especially for them, but in the midst of the P5 as well, Cincinnati, number 42 in the country with their class, brought in 24 3-stars, and some of those could have been 4 stars. And likely will develop into that kind of talent. Memphis, number 46, they brought in 25 3-stars. So no 4 stars, but they brought in some dudes that, other big name programs ended up missing out on because Memphis got them. SMU, number 52, right there in Dallas, big time city. They're going to bring in a bunch of local talent. That makes perfect sense. And then UCF at number 55. Even with losing their head coach, Randy Shannon as the interim coach right now, and who knows who their next coach is going to be, but UCF has just got loads of talent all around them. UCF will always have talent. So those 4 schools right there, just in the AAC, are always going to be able to get dudes. Like they're always going to be able to compete, at least with the mid-level P5 teams. And there's going to be some fun games. Next week, we're going to talk about or maybe the week after. At some point, we're going to talk about the best P5, G5 matchups going into 2021. And there's some interesting stuff, man. Interesting stuff. So I'm curious to see it. Talking about the Big Ten, Wisconsin, their number 15 overall class. That's their highest class rating ever.
Yeah, this got to be their best rating ever.
And then Iowa at number 23. It's not their best ever, but it's really, really close, and that one's pretty fantastic. So I'm looking forward to these guys because at least they're getting the talent to be able to compete.
That's right.
With Ohio State, right? Before, Ohio State could just out-talent everybody in the league, and they can still really do that. But Alabama doesn't win every game. Ohio State doesn't win every game. Clemson doesn't win every game. You have to have talent to be able to win like one-on-one matchups and whatnot. And you've got to be at a certain level to catch those guys. You bring in guys like that, like Wisconsin and Iowa have done, and you put yourself out of position to be able to do that every now and then. So Penn State was up there as well. I want to say they were in the 15, 16 range, somewhere around there. So, moving off of signing day, because really there's not a lot to talk about with signing day. You know, it is what it is, but we can find some outliers. I want to discuss the name, image, likeness bills.
So how many we got on that are going to the floor?
There are 5.
I knew there was at least 4.
There are 5. So the latest one, authored by Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, and Representative Lori Trahan, Democrat from Massachusetts. Their idea is to allow college athletes unrestricted use of their name, image, and likeness, and they would penalize schools for imposing rules that curb those rights.
That's right.
That's kind of a big deal. This is called the College Athlete Economic Freedom Act. It is the 5th different NIL congressional bill that's been introduced in the U.S. Capitol over the last year. There was a wave of state laws over NIL that are, on the brink of ending the NCAA's amateurism model. Murphy is one of the most outspoken regarding this. He has harshly criticized the NCAA for its archaic policies. He said at one point there's civil rights violations. The bill is not friendly whatsoever to the governing body of college athletics. And so Ross Dellinger wrote a really interesting article over at SI about it. He said, this one is not as expansive in nature as the College Athletes Bill of Rights, which was released in December by Richard Blumenthal and Cory Booker, 2 Democratic senators. In a way, Murphy's bill is a Democratic-leaning version of the bipartisan bill introduced in the fall by Representative Anthony Gonzalez, who's a Republican from Ohio. 2 other bills have been right-leaning ones brought in by Senator Roger Wicker and then Senator Marco Rubio. And those were much more leaning towards the NCAA.
I was about to say, helping the establishment.
So, now, this was announced 2 days after EA Sports announced their college football game coming back. And the bill, this one, now not all the other ones, but this one would allow the athletes the ability to enter into group licensing agreements. So the name, image, likeness stuff for the video game, your name could be in the game. As it stood initially, the first 4 bills that came out, you could not put together your own group to represent you.
You couldn't become a union.
Exactly. So in that case, EA Sports could not go to individual players and ask them, or offer to pay them for their likeness to be in the game and then just have like random players, right? Just create a random generated whatever player along with Trevor Lawrence, right? They were not going to do that. So this is a pretty big deal for the video game. Along with that, it's open access to NIL rights in this one. It would prohibit the NCAA. It would prohibit schools and conferences from creating guardrails that restrict prospective athletes' compensation. Basically, anything goes. It's the Olympic model.
Right.
It is if somebody thinks that your name,
any sponsorship you can sell, you can sell it,
and it doesn't matter how much it's for. It can be millions of dollars. It could be $2,000 down at the local auto mart. It could be whatever, but it is wide open because that's what's right, and it makes sense. Murphy's legislation allows colleges to work directly with athletes if they choose, rather than only allowing NIL deals through third parties. I think that is smart.
Yep.
Because at that point, you're going to have these bigger schools that will have a director of, player marketing.
I think every school can have that.
Yes.
I mean,
they should. They can't right now.
I mean, even yes, but once this goes through, you don't have to be a big school. That doesn't need to be a 6-figure job or a 7-figure job for a specialized coach.
Yes.
Okay. That can be anybody to just help these guys, because there's where lots of money come, lots of snakes are going to come.
So college basketball, for instance, we have seen it over and over.
That's right.
Agents and runners for agents, and it's
there's so much money
advisors
that gets drifted through the filter, and it has to hit all these different hands of all the seedy underbelly that has to make this whole thing work. Now you remove all of that, and I'm the sponsor. I'm paying the money to the player. I want to get the player. I want to get the talent. I don't want 9 people between me and the talent to get money. I want as much money as I can going to him or her so that they can give me the best product they have, and they're motivated to do that. My money's being well used.
It gives the NCAA and this is the biggest part of this, it gives the NCAA no antitrust protections, and it includes antitrust penalties if college, conference, or the NCAA violates the law. This is a major deal.
That's huge.
And so it allows the colleges to help the kid, and that way you don't have to get involved with agents. You don't have to get involved if you don't want to. Now, you can if you want to.
If you want to give somebody 10% of your money, sure.
Or you can just go through the school, and they can set it up because they have all the contacts that the agents would have, so it is what it is. The legislation does grant one provision that the NCAA requested in what they were asking of Congress in the first place, which you and I laughed about this. Yeah. But it preempts state laws governing NIL. This is what the NCAA was terrified of, right? They did not want the states to come up with all these different rules in each. Like if you go to Florida, well, you can make
Mississippi
$1 billion.
Can't change the law, so helps.
Yes.
Southern Miss all of a sudden becomes a big national power because we've changed the rules.
Exactly.
And no other school can offer what we can offer. I get that provision, and I think that's probably right.
We have laughed at the idea of the NCAA just throwing their hands up at this.
Yep.
But part of the reason why the NCAA did that, right? We talked before, why would you ever want to allow the government to handle your business? That makes no sense. Like, you handle your own business.
That's right.
And then if somebody needs to step in.
Because this is what happens when the government handles it, by the way.
This is what happens.
The government says, your business is now my business.
Exactly.
Thank you.
So, the part of the reason why they were waiting, though, and part of the reason why they asked Congress to jump in on this, we're not going to get a ruling on this for a while. The NCAA was expected to pass groundbreaking NIL legislation in January. They delayed the measure in light of a Supreme Court case, and that's Austin against the NCAA, that could impact the organization's rules on amateurism and antitrust. The Supreme Court is expected to hear the Austin case on March 31st and deliver a ruling no later than the end of June. So it could be a little while before we get a firm thing on this. I don't know the full details of the Austin case. I will tell you this. I will have that by next week's show. But yeah, there's just there's a lot going on, obviously, with Congress, but this is, for a lot of people that are up there on Capitol Hill, this is fun.
Yeah.
Like, this is something interesting. Hey, how can we change college athletics for future generations? How can we change this to where everything is somewhat equal? We have talked in the past about players being paid, et cetera, et cetera. You can keep an amateurism model the same way that the Olympics have done. Like, we've seen this. Allow the players to be paid by somebody else, and then you don't have to worry with it if you're the schools.
Sure.
Right? You don't have to completely separate and figure out how to pay these guys this percentage and whatnot, because if you're doing that, Alabama is going to bring in $60 million in 3 years because of their ESPN deal, and Memphis is still going to be bringing in $7 million.
That's right.
Like, that would be an even bigger
You can't let
divide.
the schools use the school money.
Exactly. So if you're allowing third parties to do this and you can get the players paid by other means, that makes a whole lot more sense. And that way you just open it up for everybody, like worldwide. I think it's a massive, massive thing. I think that this is the one that's going to be chosen because it is the most wide open one. It makes it where, hey, if you're the NCAA, if you're the colleges, you cannot stop them from getting paid. Seems pretty easy.
Sure.
Like, there's no salary cap, there's no nothing, and it could help the teams like Alabama, Ohio State, etc. Or
we can't help those guys because they're already at the top.
Right, but it
do you think that Alabama can have a better recruiting class than what they had now?
I doubt it.
So the chances of them losing one of these guys to another school, any other school, even if it's another big boy school, hurts them.
Alabama had 13 of the top 58 players in the 247 composite this year. They had 17 top 100 players. Penn State. Hold on. I'm getting to a point here. Penn State had 0. The Penn State fan base, substantial.
One of those kids would have gone somewhere else.
Exactly.
Now that hurts Alabama.
Exactly.
So that's how you bring things a little closer. That's how you close the gap.
Yes. I think that this is
I also believe it's going to hurt a lot of the bagman money drop boosters big time.
I think it gets things out in the open more.
Yes, and that's what I've always wanted, by the way.
Keeps it from being dirty.
This is what I've always wanted is I know all these guys are getting paid. It's not a problem that I have with these kids getting paid. I actually like it. I hate it. I hate that percentages of their money are going to these seedy, shady characters. But what I hate more than anything is let it be a free market. Let it be a free market where everybody knows what the bid is.
Yes.
I want to go play at Alabama. But do I want to play there enough to where I would walk away from $50,000 to go play at Auburn?
Yeah.
How much does $50K change my life? You know, whatever the number is, it might be $200K.
Yeah, there's no telling.
But whatever that number is, I just want that out in the open.
Yeah, it's like I'm based
Mississippi
down in
State
Florida.
was bidding $180,000 at one point in time blindly to try to get Cam Newton. Then reports came out that Cam Newton goes to Auburn and the number comes out to like 230. And I have a bunch of State friends that are all saying, if we'd known the number was 230, we could have got to 250. I mean, we got some money down here that we're not using. Like we could have gotten there. We didn't know.
Yeah,
because it's all done in the backwoods. That's why the South is really good about this, is because it's easy to hide money on these back roads in these small towns.
A lot of 503Cs getting paychecks.
And therein lies the issue of I wanted to bring it out of the light. So when that bag man drops off 10 grand, that 10 grand doesn't mean nothing to that kid. That 10 grand is not going to make him go to your school. So they're going to stop dropping the bag.
I mean, and the same thing can be said for G5s, right?
Yeah.
Florida kid wants to play, big time football. He might have a deal that's worth $2,500 at Ole Miss or something like that, but he can make $25,000 by staying at USF.
That's
or
right.
something like that. I mean, there's no telling, right? So it's a whole.
I mean, let's say Disney
deal.
calls and says, "Hey, you want to come dance with Mickey?" Like, oh, okay, sure, no problem.
We can do Central Florida.
Yeah,
we can do Central
I'll just
Florida.
stay here.
That's what I'm talking about. All right. We will, before we bring in Josh Pate from 247 Sports, I want to close out with this one. Super Bowl was yesterday. Obviously, we are not an NFL show. We are recording on Monday. But did want to bring up one interesting tweet that came out last week. Penn State decided, for whatever reason, that they wanted to celebrate the fact that there were some Penn Staters in the Super Bowl. And they put out a graphic that said Penn State, or a Penn Stater, football player, whatever, has appeared in every Super Bowl. And then in fine print, down at the very, very bottom, it said, except for 5 since 1967. I don't understand why these big brands would need, like this had James Franklin written all over it.
Yeah.
Why would you need to do that when it's a really awesome enough stat that, hey, we've had a Penn State player in every Super Bowl except for 5.
Yeah.
Just make it that. Don't
just
say
make it that. Don't hide that little thing. Just be who you are. Be what you are. I don't know. I think a lot of these guys are bad at their jobs. I think the marketing side of this is really bad at their job.
They don't need to hype any more than they already do.
No.
Like it's not going to help with recruiting. All this is going to do is end up with trolls. The same, like Ole Miss. Put one out.
Well, Lane Kiffin is the greatest troll of college sports.
And that graphic that Ole Miss put out,
45 minutes away from me, it makes me so happy.
The tweet said, "Hold my solo cup," and the graphic was almost identical to Penn State's and said, "An Ole Miss Rebel has won every Super Bowl." And down at the bottom it said, "Except for the ones they didn't." And it's the same thing.
If you want to boost your school's brand, then you got to have stars in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Okay. Michigan for 20 years is still getting free pub off of Thomas Brady, the Golden Boy, being the Michigan man. Okay.
Yes.
Your guy has to have a star. All right. Texas Tech is getting publicity that they've never gotten before in any time.
Which is crazy. Think about this. They had Patrick Mahomes down at Texas Tech. They fire their coach, who then gets an NFL head coaching job, and they can't really maximize that publicity.
Yeah,
because they fired the guy that had Patrick Mahomes.
I was about to say, you got to find a way to. You better make sure somebody's got a good relationship with Patrick still.
Yes.
And somebody has to make sure that you can put his. I remember growing up, and we're Memphis guys, Tennessee. We saw Peyton Manning's face everywhere.
Yes.
When he was with the Colts making that run for Tennessee. Eli does it for Ole Miss.
Oh, yeah.
You got to make your stars. You shouldn't have to tell us he's a Penn State guy. You know what? There were 6 LSU boys in the Super Bowl last night.
Yep.
And they were the stars of the show. Outside of the quarterbacks, every other star that played was an LSU guy.
Oh, yeah. Leonard Fournette, Devin White, Tyrann Mathieu. I mean, it was all over the place, man. So, yeah, there's other ways to go about this. I think Penn State went about it the wrong way.
I think they went about it the wrong way. I think it was bad. I think it was embarrassing. So, do you think this is a thing where they're trying stuff and we're going to see more of this and maybe they'll get better? Or is this all right, that was a huge embarrassing failure. Let's just stop doing that crap.
I think that schools have spent so much money on these graphic design departments and whatnot, these marketing departments. We're going to see more of it. It's going to be all over social media because there's 40 billion different social media channels, and there's Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and, blah, 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 YouTube and whatever else. There's all this different stuff out there. And they got to find something for them to do to justify paying them the money that comes in from TV, right? You can't pay the players. There's only so many buildings on campus that you can build, and your coach is already making egregious amounts of money. Like, as long as they've got marketing departments and graphic design departments and all that, you're going to see more of this stuff. Like, you won't see maybe to this extent, because I think a graphic that said a Penn Stater has been in every Super Bowl except for 5 since 1967. Right. Like, just making an even...
all but 5.
Yeah.
And there's a way to say that better than they said it.
Yes. You can make the graphic... Like, that graphic itself would have been perfectly fine.
We had 55 Super Bowls. Literally, just say, it's Super Bowl 55. A Penn State player has been in 50 Super Bowls. Bam.
Easy enough.
Like, you don't have to do the caveat at the end and the little clarification. Like, you don't have to make it sound weird. Just use numbers. And boom, it sounds awesome. Holy crap.
A Penn Stater
50
has been...
out of 55 is amazing.
Yes.
Right? Like, you hear that and you think, dude, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Nobody questions it.
I don't know why they...
You don't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be everyone. It doesn't have to be all.
Nope.
But if you go 24 for 26, it's pretty good.
It's not bad.
Pretty good.
It's not bad.
So,
all right, let's go ahead and move into our first interview here on the show. So this is our buddy Josh Pate. We'll just go ahead and get right to it. Now, welcoming to the show, the guy that can enunciate better than any college football media person that I know, the best speaker, and obviously the best dressed with his 247 Sports shirt on, Josh Pate from Lake Kick Live and 247 Sports. Josh, we appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, I just want to stress to the listeners and viewers, neither of those bullet points were on the cue card I gave you. So that came from your mind, not mine.
Yes. Oh, yes. I had to make sure I put it down perfectly. I have not found anybody that can go through entire segments without dropping an in there the same way that you do. You have practiced this. And I know you've talked about it on the podcast multiple times, but it amazes me that you can just spur of the moment, think up these stories, think up things without anything else. There's very few pauses. You just roll through things. Like, how in the world did you teach yourself to do that?
The actual answer is really boring. So I'll give you a made up answer. Like when I remember back in the day when they would show the behind the music on VH1 for the music videos. And I learned that the way that they looked at the way they make it look so cool, like people are moving like this, is because they film it in 2x and then they just play it and it's kind of slow motion. And listen, maybe I figured out a way to do shows in that format. And so maybe I'm talking like I am actually from West Central Georgia, where I am from and situated at this moment. Listen, the actual answer is I used to ride around in my Toyota Tundra all the time before anyone ever gave me a second of being on radio. And I did make-believe segments and I practiced hundreds and hundreds of hours. And that is actually how I trained myself to remove what I call the crutch phrases and the crutch words.
We probably need to do that. Really.
Well, I have the time. I mean, I do about 200 miles a day on my truck. So
we started our podcast years ago. And when we started, we had an old cell phone that we'd put in between us, and we would sit on the other side of a table And that's how we started our Winning
Yeah, we
Cures
sat on
Everything
a
podcast.
couch and we just, the cell phone sat in between us. It was pretty horrible.
We had no idea what we were doing. We didn't do video to begin with. It was just audio. And we started that out and our friends started listening and they started telling friends and et cetera, et cetera. And the listenership grew and it continued to grow organically and et cetera. So we never bought ads or anything like that. But as we went on, we had to learn how to get comfortable in front of a camera. And I took to it a little easier than Chris
I'm still
did.
not comfortable.
And so
at this moment right now, I'm incredibly uncomfortable.
So I was in a rock band before this. So I am used to being in front of a lot of people, not so much being in front of a camera, but it's kind of the same thing. You know that you're talking to a large audience when you do this. Tell me about how you started Late Kick and how it kind of ended with you turning into the face, I guess, for 247 Sports for their YouTube channel.
Well, so the way I used to work in a fabric warehouse down actually where I am at the moment, or just south of here in Columbus, Georgia. I was technically the age where you would be in college, but I really had no clue what I wanted to do. So I kind of weaved in and out of Columbus State University here in beautiful Columbus, Georgia. And I didn't really have a clue where I was going. And so I worked in the fabric warehouse there for a while. We'd listen to sports talk radio every day. And that's how we bridged the gap between getting there and lunch. And then hopefully from lunch, you can just kick it to 5 o'clock by any means necessary. Sometimes take a nap in the bathroom. That actually happened on the floor, no less, on the floor. Oh. So that's, times were tough, relatively speaking, but I always knew I wanted to do this stuff. I just had no clue. I had no relatives in the business. I had no in. I had no connection, no training, no nothing.
Much like
to this day, I've never had a second of training actually. So that hasn't changed. But what I did was I used to drag my friends into the auditorium of our church building when it was, not Sunday or Wednesday. And we would record make-believe sports segments, MLB season previews, college football previews. And so I had some air check stuff. I had some demo stuff. And I sent it off to the local ESPN radio affiliate in Columbus, to the program director there at the time. And he said, you can come in, man, come in, observe. That's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to actually say I knew someone in the sports media business. And secondly, I wanted to watch the sausage get made, so to speak, behind the scenes. So I go in there a couple of weeks, and then his co-host is sick one day. So he just 15 minutes before air, hey, you want to jump on air? So I didn't have time to be nervous. I just jumped on air. We took calls. It was 4 to 7 afternoon drive. It was the most fun I'd ever had outside of a playground on an elementary school campus. And so that turned into a full-time gig for about 2 years. Get a call from a guy who was a general manager at a TV station, the NBC affiliate here in Columbus, WLTZ. And he said, hey, man, we've had this idea, our sales department and me, we want to put on a 5-night-a-week college football show. We have no clue who to put in the driver's seat. I listen to you every day on the way home. You ever done TV? No. Well, do you want a show anyway? Yeah, absolutely. And so I ended up doing that. That elevated into that plus sports anchor. And then that elevated into news anchor. And so you fast forward about 5 years. And you've been covering the greatest conference in America, the SEC, every Saturday. And high school football is really a big deal down here. And got a call from CBS and 247 Sports out of the blue again. Hey, saw your YouTube channel, which is another story, how we that came to be while I was doing local TV. But the basic premise is I did it for that very reason, to get noticed outside of one market, and it worked. And so I've been fortunate enough, came here in January of last year, and have essentially been given, irresponsibly on their part, been given the keys to the car essentially before they ever saw me test drive it. And so I don't know who was making that call. I think that probably it was a very unwise decision that just happens to have paid off so far for him.
It appears to be working out well. The listenership looks like it is going through the roof. The viewership, the numbers are bigger and bigger every week, it feels like. Are you continuing the 3-day-a-week thing in the off season?
So the way I'll do that, and the way I did it independently, I'm keeping the same format, is I do Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday during the season, and then I'll do Sunday and Thursday in what you would call the off season. I don't like saying the word out loud because I don't believe in it. Yeah. And so, listen, honestly, the college football calendar, especially this year moving forward, has kind of evolved where you don't really have to say the word. It's giving you something kind of like the NFL every month or other month to talk about. But I also fill that in with a lot of podcast only type content. So there's something that needs to be talked about between Sunday and Thursday, we'll get it talked about some way or another.
Now the National Signing Day stuff was great. One in December and then in February. What was it like transitioning from what you normally do with Late Kick into a full day marathon, multiple guests, bringing in, kids to do their announcements, et cetera, you're swapping back and forth. I know it had to be a little hectic. What was it like swapping over, transitioning to that kind of a show?
Loved it because it is extremely hard, but it was extremely easy at the same time. What they didn't really know here at 24/7, they know it, but I worked with CBS a lot for that project too. For all they knew, they were just putting some rando who's been doing YouTube shows in the driver's seat to do a 3-hour, and we did an 8-hour early signing day marathon, which is insanity. I lost like 7 pounds of sweat that day. But for all they knew, they were just putting some Yahoo in the driver's seat who didn't even so much as know what A to B SOT camera transition was. And so all that's fancy rundown talk. But I had done local news for 5 years. So I'm more comfortable in that role than I am the late kick role. And so I didn't tell him that. So I gave him reason to be nervous, and I let everyone sweat. And then, I'm fumbling papers right up until, all right, 10, 5, 4, 3, and then whoosh, you just roll it. That stuff's fun to me, especially when you have a lot of moving elements, because everyone else is freaking out. And so you have no choice but to be calm amidst chaos. And I kid you not, when I was a news anchor, a clean show was boring to me. I wanted something to screw up. I got to where I wanted it to screw up. And so I would intentionally ad lib. I would toss to our meteorologist for a weather tease early. I would back and forth crosstalk with our sports anchors during sports. Everyone else was uncomfortable with it, but I would fall asleep, man. I used to do 5 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., which means you're waking up at 3:30. You're coming in and doing things your dad told you never to do, including putting makeup on your forehead to decrease the shine. And it was boring if a clean show happened. And so I'm totally at ease with that stuff, but it is not human nature to be at ease in the midst of all that.
Yeah, in the midst of chaos, you found a comfort there. Let's switch off, and we'll do that. We'll keep you comfortable here by swapping every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
The Ramen Noodle Express, really successful this year. Now we'll go ahead and say this: Chris is an LSU fan, and obviously he's a big fan of you last season during the national championship run, or I guess the 2019 season, last season. And I'm an Alabama fan. So, and we let that bias out there. We let everybody know, hey, this is what we are, and it is what it is. Now, we try our best to be unbiased, et cetera, but we try not to let it affect our gambling picks, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to ask for the exact formula. Obviously, there isn't an exact formula when it comes to handicapping games and whatnot, but how did the Ramen Noodle Express come about? How were you so successful? What tips would you give to bettors going forward into this next coming season?
Well, I'd tell them never bet teams. If you've been betting teams, then don't ever bet teams again. You got to bet numbers. It's all numbers. You ignore the helmet sticker and everything like that. I'll tell you what I did probably about 10 years ago now. I teamed up with a data analyst at Total Systems, works in Columbus. I went to school with him. Brilliant guy. Loves football. Didn't play it, but loves it. And I mean, is like a Rain Man when it comes to numbers, data, and analytics. And so, I guess the evolution of college football kind of fell into his sweet spot, because in 1997, no one's doing that, or no one knew to do it.
Oh, yeah.
And fast forward to 2020, and you're a dinosaur if you're not really doing it or not speaking that language. And so we started to formulate a model about 10 years ago. And what we wanted was we didn't want necessarily score projections. What we just wanted was our own number. We wanted to generate our own number on a game. And so I knew what I wanted to weigh, but I had no clue how to build just from the ground up, the nuts and bolts. I don't know. I barely knew how to open Excel. So I didn't know how to build that. He did. He and another guy who actually works for either Adobe or Apple now, we built the system together, and that thing has been ultra successful. If I didn't feel so comfortable doing what I was doing right now, I would probably go more down the handicapping route. And what I don't like is, even though Two for the Money is one of my favorite movies, and I watched it just yesterday with Matthew McConaughey, got to interview McConaughey over the summer and talked about Two for the Money with him, by the way. I don't want to name drop, far be it from me to name drop, but that was fun. And so I tell people the second piece of information would be, for me, I personally don't ever tell people buy picks from someone. Buy the information. That's what I want. And so that's what we've done. We don't run a service per se, but if we did, we sell the information. That's what we'd sell. And then, if you know ahead of time, and you guys know all too well what I mean, even people who are buying packs of service picks, they're not betting 100% of what they get. They're inserting their own gut as a filter, which you should never do, especially if you're paying for picks. You should never do that, but they're going to do it anyway. And so really all you're doing is affirming. You're looking for affirmation for your own gut anyway. Okay, so if you're going to do that, I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're going to do it, why not just buy information? Don't buy picks, buy information. And so what we did was we wanted to generate two things, and we still do it to this day with minor tweaks. We do it the same way. We're generating a margin on a game. And I don't really care about total betting so much, to be honest with you. I just want a margin on a game. And then I also want a cover probability. And on the game, we hit at 60.1 this year over, I think, 56 total wagers, which we're happy with. We've been above 55 every year for the past half decade. So I'm very happy with the numbers, but it's gotten better as we've refined and added filters in. And what we hit on this year, just on the games with a cover probability of, I think, 61.5% or higher, it was a 63% overall against the spread number against the opening line. So now I can't tell you I went that because I didn't straight across the board bet them. But then you feel like an idiot at the end of the year because you look and you say, why is there guesswork here? Why don't you just bet these games? Yeah. And so part B of that is if anyone were to come to me and tell me they had a system hitting at that percentage, I call BS on it. So I expect people to call BS on me on that. And I can't tell you that there's a site out there that we've documented those numbers with because we don't sell the picks, so we don't feel the need to document it. But in the future, I feel very comfortable putting those numbers against the opening line out in the market.
And that's we give out picks here on SBR, but we try and give the information, right? So this past season, rather than give picks on the biggest games and all that, we just gave as much predictive analytics as possible, along with, all right, so here's what the number says it should be. Here are the guys that are out. Here's this and that. Sometimes the formula doesn't account for this. And we gave a feel for the game, but not necessarily a pick. And then we gave our favorite gambling picks. And a lot of them were, the G5 teams and whatnot that nobody really cares to watch. But if we felt really strong about it, we would definitely put it out there. And towards the end of the season, we were not great. Now, we both hit over 60% in the bowl season. I don't know what that says. But either way, we felt really good about it. But this past season was definitely a strange one. So I'm curious, going into this next season, I don't even know how we're going to look at it because the returning production numbers are off the wall. I mean, you got multiple teams that have like 96%. UCLA's got 96% returning production. Cincinnati's got a ton coming back. I mean, the average is like 70% returning or 69%, whatever it is. Typically, that's like 61%. So who knows what's going to happen with that? I do want to transition again. Make sure we keep you comfortable amidst the chaos. And I'm going to get Chris in on this one. Washington State just hired a director of transfer recruiting. I think that's what it's called. Oklahoma only took like 17 high schoolers. Hey, Chris, go ahead and jump in with yours.
Yeah, well, so we're talking about transfer now. So not only are you working on recruiting rankings and things like that, my question is basically, when are they going to start ranking these teams, I guess, as opposed to all new players in and not just, these are the recruits they got? Because he used Oklahoma as the greatest example, as they went out and they got a ton of transfer players. So that should greatly change the team's recruiting ranking, right? Are we ever going to get to that point?
Listen, you didn't come close to asking this question as emphatically as I've been asking it in our editorial meetings. The answer is very soon. They are in the process of overhauling. Well, really, they're creating a new, totally proprietary ranking system for the transfer portal. And so come this time, I'll say this time next year to be safe, in the next few months, you'll have every player in that portal ranked. This puts in motion something that philosophically I've believed in for a while. I got here and I've been here 5 minutes and I'm running my mouth telling them how they should run their star rankings. But what I've always believed is a star rating, however you rate players, we rate them by stars and a number. However you rate players, I've never believed that rating should stop or freeze once they become a college football player. I believe that number.
We just talked about this.
We've been talking about this for a while.
Yes.
So we completely agree.
I don't know why we don't rank college football players. Like, why is that not a thing?
I think about how flawed the mock draft process is. And to me, the natural solution to that is don't ever stop evolving the star rating on the players. If anything, you get more refined and more accurate when the competition level is accounted for, and you filter out, weak high school competition. And so, a guy like J.C. Latham, I mean, is one of the top rated players in America, but he comes into Alabama. 3 years from now, he's probably going to be a first round draft pick, but I should never have stopped the living, breathing, live up to the minute rating on him. But for the transfer portal, that's where it's necessitated that we do that now. So, I couldn't kick anyone around here to do it, but it doesn't matter because college football did. So now what you'll have, and there are a lot of really talented people around here working on it at the moment, from the tech side and the evaluation side, you'll have a living, breathing rating for all those players in the transfer portal. And then you'll be able to, I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think what they're doing is they're giving you the option to plug and then regenerate what that score would have been, what that recruiting ranking would have been. Otherwise, you can build the class the way for your purposes, if you've got a model or your own record keeping that you want to, so that you'll have a true feel. Because, Oklahoma, like you just mentioned, no one in Oklahoma looks at themselves in the mirror and says, we've got the number 11 or number 10 class right now. They're counting half a Tennessee starting roster they brought into Norman. That is part of their team this year. Yeah. Some of those freshmen aren't going to play this year. Those guys are going to play this year.
Oh, 100%. 100%. So I think that we can all agree the portal is just as important these days, maybe more so than high school recruiting.
I think that's how we're going to get the separation of we're going to close the gap. Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Georgia are separating themselves away from everybody else. If you're number 8 in the country in rankings, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, the difference between 8 and 15 might be nothing. The difference between 8 and 1 is the Grand Canyon. Okay. I think the only way to shorten that gap is with transfers. Is you got to go into those schools and find the kids that are sitting behind a stud that was a sophomore and is going to be there for 2 more years, and to say, hey, you want to come play for us? And then you steal.
Well, and there's other programs that, we've seen it with Georgia with JT Daniels, Miami with Derek King, that you're a quarterback away. It was like Tampa Bay in the NFL.
Go out and get Tom Brady. Yeah.
You're a quarterback away.
Go find your quarterback.
Yeah. In Miami last year, 6-6. This past season, they are 10-2 or 9-1 or whatever it was before bowl season.
Well, the guy I thought of was my guy, Joe
Burrow.
Joe was Mr. Ohio. And he was highly recruited, number 1 rank in the state of Ohio, went to Ohio State. He came to LSU. He might not be that level ranking when he gets to LSU. He might have dropped down a few pegs, but I would have liked to have had a grade on that. What are we getting in this kid?
Because right, now let me hit you with a counter here, okay? Because I'm gonna fly a flag I rarely fly. I'm gonna fly the little guy's flag. Yep. You said that this is going to close a gap. I can see the argument for that. But if we were in debate class, here's what I'd say. I'd say, we also have something else. We have another wave out there that we can see offshore that's approaching, and it's the name, image, and likeness wave.
Oh, yes.
So you tell me, if Central Florida has a Mackenzie Milton, a couple of years from now, Mackenzie Milton, or Houston with Derek King, if those programs, those G5 that we're trying to use this to close the gap with, if they have a quarterback pop or big-time receiver talent pop, and 5 years from now, forget Alabama, University of Arkansas is able to offer 500% in a name, image, and likeness compensation package that the G5 peer can, how are you ever going to keep ultra talented players at the G5 level?
Well, so I think it's good. Well, see, this is where I disagree on that. Some G5 schools are going to be set up for that, because you use Central Florida and you use Houston. You're talking about 2 massive cities that have tons of money. There's probably more money there for them than there is in Fayetteville, Arkansas. There just is. And so I think those schools will be able to do it. But your school, Tulsa's going to struggle. Okay. Tulsa's not keeping that kid.
App State might be in trouble.
App State's not going to keep that kid because there's nothing there for them to buy into. But these big mega cities where these huge universities are, I think they actually will be able to compete.
So
I might be wrong on that, but
here's my debate class's bell has not rung yet. So here's my counter on that. There's a little upstart company just outside of Fayetteville in Bentonville. It's called Walmart. Yeah. So they've done okay for themselves. But that's notwithstanding, Arkansas is the exception to the rule. But let me just paint the picture of why I think this. So you're right. Central Florida is in a big city, major metropolitan Orlando, and Fayetteville's up. It's halfway to Russia for all we care.
Alumni base down in Orlando.
Yeah, it's all well and good. Okay, so Danny White, one of the big stats that I loved about when he went from Central Florida to Tennessee is his last fiscal year, or physical year, as I like to say, his last physical year at Central Florida, their fundraising was 400% higher than it had been 4 years prior.
Right.
So their fundraising had a top 30 some odd $1 million in that last year. That's an incredibly high number for a G5. I mean, that's really, really good. Arkansas, just from their TV deal alone, cashed a $45.7 million check.
Which
so
that money can't go to the players, though.
Oh, my friend, can't and won't are two very different words there. Let's be careful.
No. If the players start getting the TV money, then yes, the SEC is going to continue to dominate, and all these conferences with big TV deals are gonna crush people. I was working under the impression that name, image, and likeness is supposed to be you go out and get your own deals, and the TV money is going to continue to come in and feed the schools. So therefore, your local places are going to just have to feed the horses.
We're going to have to figure out this name, image, likeness stuff. I will certainly want to have you back on to dig into this, because we're not going to have a resolution on that until after March 31st.
Right.
But it brings up an interesting thing that popped up last week. We have already talked on the show about EA Sports bringing back the college football video game. In your opinion, and we've already let ours known, I think it is massively important for the popularity of the sport on a national level. What are your thoughts on EA Sports bringing it back? What does that do for the sport itself?
It's massive. Okay. It's massive for obvious reasons and for less obvious reasons. I can make a very, very strong correlation to baseball. Well, I hope it's strong. I'll make a correlation. So the key to the survival of any entertainment brand is to keep the youngs interested. Just the youngs, that demo.
Yes.
I grew up, so I was born in the mid 80s. So I'm a kid in the 90s. And so I remember vividly, I'm a kid in the sweet spot of baseball movies from the late 80s to the late 90s. All the great baseball movies outside of For Love of the Game, all the great baseball movies came out. Sandlot, Little Big League, if you want to go Field of Dreams, you want to go Bull Durham, Major League, all the way from the G to the R. All the great ones came out when I was a kid.
Rookie of the Year.
I think literally that stretch of great baseball movies that serve to romanticize the sport and connect a young generation to the sport, I think it did way more than anything on the field did in the early 90s.
Were about kids.
Yes. I like when they had the strike in 94, a lot of people think that the home run chase in 98 brought people back, and to a certain degree it may have. I'm telling you, a lot of little kids never left the sport because the movies were still coming out and they were being made. So then how does that correlate to college football? It correlates in much the same way. Like, what do you think the key adhesive has been for an 8-year-old? An 8-year-old doesn't care how many 5 stars Alabama signing. They do care if they can throw on dynasty mode on the video game and they can run the table, or they can go to Western Michigan and in a few years, have them a part of the Big Ten and competing for a national title. That stuff is what brings a younger generation to the table in 2021. And I don't know that people grasp how important romanticizing your product is, because the emotional bond is a lot more even than if you're attracted to it for gambling. I didn't have a cent on the Super Bowl last night. I didn't spend much time trying to find value. So I didn't have a cent on the Super Bowl. It's just another game to me from a betting perspective. And so I watched it, but I wasn't necessarily dialed into it. So I didn't have the emotional attachment. I wasn't invested. But from a kid's perspective, hopefully they're not betting money, but if they are, that's why the Ramen Noodle Express is named what it is, because dad's got to feed you somehow. But it's the emotional connection. Baseball movies did it for me with that sport in the 90s. All the sports movies suck now. It's no coincidence that a lot of young people have walked away from certain sports. I don't think it's just because they don't play them as much. And so I think that's why the video game is so crucial for college sports. And enough smart people know that who are making decisions. I
would think so. Explain to him how you became an LSU fan. I mean, it's the same thing.
So I've lived in my entire life in the city of Memphis, okay, or
that's where we are now.
Area of Memphis, and I've never gone to a game outside of the Liberty Bowl. Okay, we never drove down to Oxford. That was going out of town for us. All right, That didn't happen. And I've been to many games in the Liberty Bowl and exhibitions and NFL games and all kinds of, never left. My 10th grade year, my best friend a guy moved into our town, and we became best friends. They were big LSU people. And we went down for an LSU Florida game. LSU got the hell beat out of them. And at no point in time did those people stop cheering, stop going crazy, and they were losing. And I just thought, I'm never rooting against these people in my life. This is what I want to be when I get big. That's all I could think of, is I want to be a part of this forever. And it hooked me, and I fell in love with that place and those people and what was going on. And you're right, like you talk about. So that's I'm the Gary's a robot, but he's also a brain. Like he's a computer. He knows numbers. He does the analytics. He does all this. I am the opposite of that, because I don't do any of it. I don't care. I know it's important, but I'm not smart enough to understand it. Okay. I understand passion, hatred, love. I understand these things. And that's how I fell in love with the game, the sport, the team that I follow, and the people that I follow now.
And it's partly why we allow our biases out in the public to begin with. So
I have to.
It is what it is. Now we'll let you get out of here with this. I've kept you longer than I told you I would, but I appreciate you hanging out a little bit longer. Are you excited at all about the FCS spring season?
Do you want me to give you the right answer or the honest answer? What are we looking for here?
Oh,
give me the honest.
I don't lie to anybody.
I don't care about it all that much. I'm happy it's there, but I don't care about it all that much.
I will say this. I'm excited to get to watch FCS teams that I have not gotten a chance to. Yeah, that's about it. Like I'm excited for Saturday night, McNeese State and Tarleton State. I want to see Coach O's son play. I would never have watched Coach O's son play football. Yep. Like none of that would have happened. But I am excited about that. But
here's what worries me. Okay. What worries me is Jerry, the mechanic down on 2nd and Broad, is about to have an uncomfortable amount of his paycheck on Wisconsin Whitewater. And the man couldn't find it on a map to save his life. Okay. So I'm concerned about the general population. You're just looking for your own entertainment. I'm worried about the people.
That is a valid concern. That is an astute observation. That is 100% gonna be an issue.
Yes, I think it might be.
Half of Louisiana is going to be betting on Coach O's son.
No doubt.
I mean, it's going to happen.
It's just the right thing. Yeah, it's just the right thing to do at this point.
That's right.
You better believe it. All right. We'll let you get out of here. Go ahead and tell everybody where they can find you, where they can watch the show, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the best place to find it is the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. We do Late Kick Live there. There are some other things there. Also got the podcast feature where we do some extra shows per week. The Late Kick with Josh Pate, anywhere you get your podcast. And you can follow me on Twitter at LateKickJosh.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Josh, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for jumping on with us.
All right, guys. It was fun.
Absolutely. We appreciate Josh for being here. Of course, you can find him at LateKickJosh on Twitter, and you can find him over on the 247 Sports YouTube page, as well as their website, 247sports.com. Let's close out the show today by discussing FCS football. It is making its return this week. We are, of course, excited because, just because the Super Bowl is over, that does not mean the football is over. FCS, which is still Division I, but this is the subdivision underneath the FBS. They've got their playoff. Everybody has watched North Dakota State and James Madison, teams like this. It's where App State came from. It's where Georgia Southern came from. It's, et cetera, et cetera. It's where Idaho moved back to.
Yes.
So
you think UConn's going to go back there?
I think eventually they might.
I think it'd be good for them.
Now that they've gone independent. Yeah. Certainly.
I think it would actually be a positive thing for them.
I think so as well. The issue is the money. There's no money really in FCS. Like you have to have boosters. You have to have
I don't know
all
if
that.
They're making money now though.
They're really not. But some of these buy games that they would get as an independent would pay for almost all of their
if they could get
athletic budget.
Yeah, if they could get pay for wins.
Yeah, because their Big East tie-in with basketball, it's et cetera, et cetera. So our first game of the FCS spring season is Saturday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. It is going to be on ESPN+, and that's where a lot of these are going to be. You're going to see games on Friday nights. You're going to see games on Saturdays, and you're going to see a lot of games on Sundays. And a lot of this is being done to fit TV schedules and whatnot. Also, so that they don't contaminate or whatever you want to call it with basketball, right? Because a lot of these FCS teams also have Division I basketball teams. There's 130 FBS football teams. There's 353 Division I basketball teams that all get into the NCAA tournament, right? So there's a lot of schools that don't want to hurt their draw or hurt their attention away from basketball at the same time while football's going on. A lot of these teams are going to have 6-game schedules. Some of them will have 8-game schedules, et cetera, et cetera. We'll see what happens when we get to the playoffs in April. But as of right now, Saturday, February 13th, we've got McNeese State, the Cowboys, with new head coach Frank Wilson, former UTSA head coach, going up against Tarleton State over in Texas. And Tarleton State is a very interesting team here. They were a Division II team that this was their season to jump up to FCS. So much like App State was an FCS team that moved to FBS, Tarleton State was Division II moving up to FCS. Tarleton State, the last 2 seasons, 11-1 last year, lost in the playoffs. 12-1 the year before that, lost in the playoffs. Really, really good team. And they are fantastic. Todd Whitten is their head coach. Fantastic on offense. Averaged 45 points per game last year, only gave up 16.5. But what does that look like against an FCS schedule?
Yeah, up at a new level.
Right. So they are one of only 2 FCS independents right now, and they will be moving into a new conference. There's a lot of realignment and whatnot going on. We'll talk about that with our FCS preview next week. But things are moving around. There's some teams that aren't going to play, et cetera, et cetera. Like Tarleton State is going to play Dixie State, which is the only other independent team. They're going to play at Dixie State, and Dixie State's going to come to their place.
Yep.
So out of their 8 games, they're going to have 2 of them against Dixie State, which is a school that's over in, I want to say, Utah.
Yeah, they're just trying to get a schedule in. They're trying to get any semblance of a season.
Their head coach, Todd Whitten, he has been the head coach at Tarleton State 3 different times. His first stint as head coach was in 1996, and he did a pretty good job, and he got the offensive coordinator position, I believe, at Wyoming. And then he bounced around a few places, went to Sam Houston State and blah, 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 blah. He comes back in 2000, stays until 2004, takes the head coaching job at Sam Houston State, and then he bounces around. He's the offense coordinator at Lamar, and he goes to UTEP, and that's where he got picked up by Tarleton State the 3rd time. As a head coach there, he's 79-37. Pretty good. Pretty good. They're going to have to replace their quarterback, Ben Holmes. He threw for 3,300 yards, 34 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions last season, but he was a senior. And that's what you get. In this division, in this level of football, it's a lot about who's got the seniors coming back, right?
That's right. It's all experience.
Exactly. So
we found that out in the regular season, by the way, of the FBS.
Yes. No, we certainly did. Experience matters, especially in a year like this. Going over to McNeese State down in Louisiana, Frank Wilson, of course, coached at LSU, was the head coach at UTSA, was a recruiting gangbuster, man. He was phenomenal at that. And everybody thought at UTSA he kind of had the ball rolling, and then he had a couple of bad years, and they threw him out on the trash heap for whatever reason. And instead of going back and getting a coordinator role or a recruiting coordinator role or whatever at a big-time school, which I'm sure he could have gotten at LSU or any number of places inside the SEC because he's got those ties, he still wanted to be a head coach. I can't say I blame him for that.
He liked running his own program.
Oh, yeah. So he goes to McNeese State. They are projected 6th out of 11 in the Southland Conference this season. Finished 7-5 last year, but they did go 4-1 in their last 5. And then the coach either retired. I couldn't find all the information on this. It's tough to find information on it. But either way,
not a lot of people covering these schools.
No, you got that right. You've got that right. However, this is a team with a strong defense and kind of a weak offense, or at least it has been over the past however long. They weren't great last year. And the teams that they did beat towards the end of the season, in that 4-1 finish, not very good. It was a lot of bad teams. So they were not very good, but that's okay. Their starting quarterback, here's the interesting part of this and why you will be interested in the game.
Yeah.
Cody Orgeron, Coach O's son, is the starting quarterback for McNeese State. So the Cowboys are going to have somebody that you will at least have somewhat of a rooting interest in.
Yes.
Last year, 26.1 points per game and 25.9 points per game against. that's a far cry from Tarleton State, which we said 45 points per game on offense, gave up 16.5. I think this thing's going to be close. There are a couple of sites out there that will simulate the stats and simulate the strength of schedule and blah, 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 blah. With the returning starters and all that kind of stuff, they are projecting this to be Tarleton State 30-24 in this game. And this is the grand opening of Tarleton State's brand new football facility. And they are saying that there's a lot of FBS programs that would be jealous of this. Tarleton State over in Texas.
Wow.
They got some major donor money. I'm talking booster money out the wazoo at this place. Now, the stadium only holds like 7,000 people.
Yeah.
But it is real nice. I've seen all the pictures and whatnot. It's going to be interesting to see, especially because, even though it's COVID, Texas is kind of open.
Yeah, no, Texas is all the way open.
So I am excited to see this. The score projection is somewhere around 5.5 to 6 points. They are projecting a 30-24 score. I don't know enough about them to make a pick, but
yeah, no.
But I will roll with those stats.
I'll be interested in watching though. I mean,
yes.
I'm gonna watch.
Yes, I mean it's football on a Saturday night. It's the only football game on. I'll watch.
That's right.
So basketball, once we get a little closer to March, I'll be digging into the college basketball stuff. But right now, for sure, and especially on this show, we're going to be watching some FCS stuff. So with that said, what do you say we go ahead and get out of here?
Yes, sir.
All right. You guys know what to do. Again, go ahead and like the video. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. We are over 80.5 thousand subscribers on this channel. I mean, that's ridiculous. So we certainly appreciate you guys for watching and for being a part of the crew here. And again, like the video for us. That helps us out a ton. Jump in the comments. Let us know what you like about the show, what you don't like, any recommendations, what you would like to see while we're doing these off-season shows. Again, this is off-season week number 4. We got 31 of these. And we're going to be doing some more, of course. We'll do maybe double duty once we get towards NFL draft time. And we'll be doing previews, et cetera, et cetera. Lots to get into in the offseason, of course. And we'll be having more special guests, et cetera, et cetera. So like the video. Make sure you are subscribed. Jump in the comments. Share the show out, et cetera. And, of course, head over to sbrpicks.com/NCAAF. With that said, for sportsbookreview.com, I'm Gary.
And I'm Chris.
And we will see you again next week.